to keep my remarks short and then answer all your questions, all right? So I don't know if you saw my announcement speech, but I did it right outside of Trump International. Did you see it? Well, the reason why I took the fight to him is because President Trump is creating so much division and hate in this country, but he is very small. He is weak, he is a coward. He is a leader who actually punches down. He demonizes those who need our help, those who need our support. He demonizes the LGBTQ community. He demonizes our transgender troops. And when you have a bully like that as President of the United States, what it means is it loses who we are as a country. Our country, at its best moments, has always been strong. In fact, we don't even remember what it's like to have a president who's brave. Do you remember what it's like when a president says, let's send a man to the moon? Or when a president says, let's pass the Civil Rights Act? That's what bravery looks like. It's when you're willing to take on the battles that no one else is willing to take on, and you are willing to do the thing that is really hard to do. So what you're doing right now on the grassroots is exactly what our country is made of. You are fighting district by district, state by state. You flipped the House in 2018. Thank you for doing the work. We know that when our democracy is strong, the people's voices are heard. And I think what we're talking about here today is really meaningful. The fact that we want to restore this democracy to the hands of the people. If you want to do that, you have to go to the root of the problem. And I can tell you, the root of the problem is corruption and greed. Anything that you want to achieve, anything, whether it's the Green New Deal, whether it's health care as a right and not a privilege, whether it's fixing our public schools, whether it's getting prescription drug prices down, I can show you what is standing in the way. Let's look at gun violence. It is the NRA. They are funded by the gun manufacturers. The gun manufacturers care more about selling weapons than having universal background checks. They would rather sell a weapon to someone on the terrorist watch list, to someone who is gravely mentally ill with a violent background. That's why they are against the Violence Against Women's Act. They would rather sell a weapon to someone with a criminal conviction for violent crimes. And that's the truth of it. And that is the difference between capitalism and greed. They are defined by their greed. Any other issue that you care about, let's say health care is a right, well, you have to be willing to take on the insurance companies. If you're unwilling to take on the insurance companies, you will never get to health care as a right and not a privilege. That's why I'm for Medicare for all, and that's why we have to fight to pass Medicare for all. So you're wondering, why am I running for president, and why am I going to win? Well, let me tell you. I have a very different history, a very different story. I got my start in politics in upstate New York. Upstate New York, in a very red place. In fact, a 2-to-1 Republican district. When I decided to run for Congress, no one thought I could win. The only person who thought I could win was my mother. And that tells you a lot about her. By the time she was my age, she was a second-degree black belt in karate. So I decided to look at this district, and I call a friend of mine who's actually really smart, a pollster, understands these things. And I told him, I said, Jeffrey, I really want to run for Congress in upstate New York, where I'm from, the 20th Congressional District. Please look it up and tell me my chances. And he said, oh, Kirsten, sorry, you can't win. And you know, I've been working for other candidates for 10 years, raising money, helping them get elected. I said, well, you know, Jeffrey, I could raise a lot of money. I could probably raise $2 million. I could get my message out. And he said, it's 2-to-1 Republican. There's not enough Democrats to vote for you. So I said, well, what happens if I run the perfect campaign? Can't I win then? And he said, there are more cows than Democrats in your district. You actually cannot win. So then I said, well, you know, this guy's a bit of a jerk, kind of a bully. What happens if he gets indicted? Clearly I could win then, right? He said, well, it depends what he gets indicted for. So you can imagine how red this district was. But I did run. I did raise close to $2 million. I ran close to a perfect campaign, and miracles do happen. But the one mistake he made is he never took me seriously. In fact, he looked at me and said, she's just another pretty face. And of course I said, thank you. And then I pivoted to talk about why I was running and that I wanted to get our troops out of Iraq. It was the #1 issue in 2005 because we were mired in the Iraq war and no end in sight. I also ran on, surprise, surprise, Medicare for all. Because even back then, in a 2-to-1 Republican district, when I traveled the district, people couldn't afford health care. They couldn't afford it because back then we didn't even have the Affordable Care Act. People were dropped coverages as soon as they had a pre-existing condition. People were discriminated against. People couldn't afford it at all. And so they wanted a solution, and I said, well, how about letting anyone buy into Medicare at a price they can afford, 4 or 5% of income? And they said, yes, that's perfect, because it creates more competition and it allows for lower prices and quality care. So when Senator Sanders introduced his bill, I got to work on the part about the transition, a 4 or 5 year transition to let people buy in, to create the competition, to bring the prices down, to get to single payer. That is the quickest way to get to single payer in America today and why I signed on to the bill. So in conclusion, I want to talk to you about why I'm going to win. I think it's really important that we have a nominee who can talk to all of America and really identify what's going on, because people across America, no matter where they live, whether they live in the Bronx, whether they lived in Long Island, whether they lived in upstate New York, no matter where they lived in my state, they feel left behind, deeply, deeply left behind. So you need an economy that can grow for all of us. You need access to higher education no matter what block you grow up on. You need better public schools. You need universal pre-K, affordable daycare. You need to be able to have good public schools and higher ed. So how about one big idea? How about telling any young person in America today, if you are willing to do a year of public service, you get 2 years of community college or state school free. If you are willing to do 2 years of public service, you get 4 years free. And the reason why this is such a good idea, because of 2 things. Number 1, we need people in public service desperately. We need the next generation of teachers. We need the next generation of nurses and home health aides. We need people trained in the green jobs of the future in STEM subjects. We need first responders, and we need more people to enter the military. It's an expansion of the GI Bill. It will work, and it will change the heart of America. So the anecdote to President Trump, who has spewed hate and division for the last 2 years he's been in office, is to take and ask America's young people, ask what you can do for America, not what America can do for you. And that's the truth of it. And so when they do public service, their hearts are changed, and we change the character of this nation in a generation. So I have 30 seconds left, so I'm going to leave you with one other big idea. So as I've been traveling around the country, the biggest concern people have right now is underemployment. It's not unemployment, it's actually underemployment. Because people are working hard all across our state and the country, but they're not being paid enough to make it into the middle class. Just not. They can't cobble together enough hours, they can't make ends meet. So why not make a commitment to America and say, if you want to work full-time, if you are unemployed or underemployed, we will pay for your job training. So whether it's in a state school, a community college, a city college, a not-for-profit, or an apprenticeship program, we will pay for your training to get a higher paying job so you can earn your way into the middle class. That is one of the best, cleanest ideas to take on institutional racism, to take on people who have been left behind and feel the economy is not built for them, for all the people who feel the system is rigged and know it. That is the best solution. So that is a way that I think we can make the economy grow and make sure every person in America has a chance to live up to their God-given potential. So let me answer questions.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you. Now you get to hear from the audience some of their questions. So this is how it's going to work. I will introduce the people who are asking questions. You will have about 6 minutes to answer. If within the 6 minutes time we have time for a follow-up, we will ask you a follow-up question. You will get 2 questions. And that is it. If you are running over time, Kelly will tap you on your shoulder. I hope that's okay.
Keep it short.
All right, so let's do it. The first question for Senator Gillibrand is from Jeremiah Laurie, whose hometown is right here in Washington, D.C., and hopefully the future state. Jeremiah is a long-time advocate and community organizer and has been a leader for years on campaign finance reform, food policy, programs for seniors, urban gardening, worker protections, and climate change. Just last year, he put all that experience to work to run for city council. Can I get a round of applause for folks willing to throw their hat in the ring to represent the best vision of our country? So welcome, Jeremiah. Take it away.
How's it going? My name is Jeremiah, and I'm representing the DC chapter of Sierra Club. Woo!
Thank you.
Climate change is no longer a thing of the future. We're seeing superstorms, drought, flooding, and wildfires ravaging our communities, and report after report demonstrating that the worst is not too far off if we fail to act. Yet Congress and the White House are not only failing to act. In the past 2 years, they sought to make matters worse as corporate polluters fill jobs in this administration and the campaign coffers of politicians. We must get corporate polluters money and the significant influence that comes with it out of politics, so the government will act on the people's best interests, not the fossil fuel industries. I understand you've chosen to not take corporate PAC money, but we need to do more. If elected president, would you commit to pushing for a small donor public financing system for federal elections, and why?
So yes, and I believe in publicly funded elections, and I'm going to actually fight for publicly funded elections. I'm on a bill, as you describe, to give democracy bonds to people so they can actually contribute. But I do think the better solution is actual publicly funded elections, to make it simpler and to have less money in politics than we have today. That's why I'm not taking corporate PAC money, not taking federal lobbyist money, and not having an individual super PAC. But your question goes to global climate change, and I want to address it. I believe that global climate change is the greatest threat to humanity that exists today. And if you have a threat so great that is killing people, whether you're in California and you have wildfires, whether you're in New York and you have Superstorm Sandy, or you have tornadoes and other severe storms all across America, people are dying. Communities are being destroyed, businesses are wiped out, and people are suffering. So you need an idea that's bold enough to meet the need and the urgency of that need. So that's why I think the Green New Deal is a perfectly good platform to start. So the Green New Deal has 3 ideas. It's got infrastructure. Everybody needs infrastructure across this country: high-speed rail, rural broadband, a new electric grid, more mass transit, sewers, and roads and bridges. Second, it asks for green jobs. It is so easy to create opportunity for green jobs. We do it in New York. A not-for-profit called Perscola teaches young people how to do cybersecurity, coding, fixing building, and computer engineering. They've already trained and placed 800 young people in jobs in the Bronx in tech companies across New York. So we can create green jobs in a huge economy and make sure the next generation have the skills. And third, it's clean air and clean water. I was just in Michigan. They've got problems in Flint, of course, with lead. I was in Iowa. They have problems with nitrates. I was in New York and Michigan and New Hampshire. They have problems of PFAS and PFOA. Every human in America has a right to have clean water coming out of their faucet, to bathe their children in clean water, to cook in clean water. And the only piece of the Green New Deal that scares people is net zero carbon emissions in 10 years. Now, when John F. Kennedy said, I want to put a man on the moon in the next 10 years, not because it's easy, but because it's hard, because it'll be a measure of our innovation and our excellence, and we're going to do it because we're going to win, why wouldn't you do the same thing? He didn't know if he would actually get a man on the moon in 10 years, but he said, I want this to be a measure of our country's strength, our competitiveness. So why wouldn't you say, we want to get to net zero carbon emissions in the next 10 years, not because it's easy, but because it's hard, and it will be a measure of our excellence and our innovation and our ability to win. So make it an issue of American competitiveness. So I would also add putting a price on carbon, because if you want to use market forces to help you get there, all you need to do is say polluters, as you asked, you pay more, and innovators and entrepreneurs and people who are creating energy efficiency and clean energies, you pay less. It's simple, it will work. So if you do both of those things, you have a chance of getting to your goal.
Amazing. Thank you.
I also signed the No Fossil Fuel Pledge.
That's right. All right. So the next question comes from an amazing organizer, LGBTQ activist, and leader with Indivisible in Orange County, California. which you may have heard is solid blue these days. That's because folks like Aaron McCall were out there organizing, mobilizing, and shaping the primaries so that candidates reflected the needs of the people. And also, when he's not saving our democracy, Aaron is also a grad student. So please help me welcome Aaron to the stage.
Hello, Senator Gillibrand. Thank you so much. I just want to say really quickly, I am so inspired by the urgency that you are seeing with all of these issues, and that's being reflected in your platform, so thank you for that. My question is, when we're looking at 2020 and even beyond, we are seeing candidates, including yourself, coming up with such bold progressive ideas like the New Green Deal, paid family leave, and ending gun violence. But the problem that we're seeing is that the filibuster rule and the 60 vote minimum in the Senate is blocking that. So regardless of whatever progressive platform that we put forward as we're going across America and people are voting for these elected officials and bringing them to Washington to enact this change, we'll never have the progressive change so long as we don't have democracy reform. So my question to you is first, do you believe in getting rid of the filibuster? And if not, how will you enact the change that you are saying you want to enact with an obstructionist Republican Senate?
Yeah. So, when I first came to the Senate, I supported filibuster reform to make it easier to get cabinet nominees and non-Supreme Court justices. So I supported the reform. When Mitch McConnell took it to the next level to reform for Supreme Court justices requiring only 51 votes, it has had devastating consequences. In fact, Mitch McConnell is right now considering making it very easy to vote very quickly and move lots of judges really fast. So if elected president, I will absolutely consider this issue. But I will tell you, if we had the filibuster reform for all issues, this actual Senate would undermine women's rights, gay rights, and clean air and clean water legislation across the board. So we have a risk that if you are for this today, it may be done before you have the majority, and what could be lost is real. So I will think long and hard about it, and I will certainly consider it if I am elected president.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. You know, I do want to follow up on that because in so many different, you mentioned the courts, but in so many different ways, excuse me, you mentioned the filibuster, but in so many different ways, our democracy is truly in peril. You know, one of the things that resonates with me is that in 2 of the last 3 presidential elections, the person that won the popular vote did not move into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
It's annoying.
So tell us more about ways that you would think about protecting the vote and other key pillars of our democracy if you were elected to the presidency.
So for me, I actually introduced a bill today about getting rid of the Electoral College. One person, one vote. Don't we agree? So that's step one. But we know from Stacey Abrams' race that voting rights is being threatened every day. As the #1 issue that she has fought for, she knows, at least I believe she would have won but for disenfranchisement of voters. So we have a real risk right now around the country that there are state legislatures who are actively trying to make sure voters don't get the right to vote. So we need a platform of ideas about what to do to actually protect our right to vote. I've been working with John Lewis for the last several years on 10 ideas about how to do that, and I'll just name a couple of them because they would make a difference. We should certainly have early voting in all states, period. 2, we should have paper ballots so that we actually, or a paper receipt for all ballots so we can actually do a recount if we needed to, given how much Russia wants to hack our elections and undermine our elections. 3, I would make sure that Election Day is a day off. It should be a federal holiday for all workers, because otherwise you might not make it to the polls in time if there's long lines, or you might not have those hours free. I would allow for early voting. I would allow for vote by mail. I would allow for automatic voter registration when you turn 18. And I would allow for registering to vote online. Several states already have it. So that's just a thumbnail sketch of some of the voting reforms that we should all be for and be really mindful of pushing, because honestly, there are Republican legislatures and governors across the country who do not want everyone to vote. And we saw it clearly in action in Georgia.
Thank you so much. Let's give it up for the senator, y'all. All right. Well, we've got a couple more minutes minutes with you, Senator. Is there anything that you want to send this group off with? This is a group of community leaders, organizers. They're committed to making sure that we fight for justice out in the community. What can you leave us with as we're looking towards 2020?
Okay, this is a choice we are all going to make right now, and it's this. What are you willing to do to make sure President Trump is not the next president for another 4 years? What are you willing to do to make sure President Trump is not the president for the next 4 years? I can tell you what I'm willing to do. I am willing to stand up to President Trump. I am the senator who voted the most against President Trump for his cabinet nominees. I am going to stand up to him every chance I get because that is who I am. The question we must ask each other now, will you be brave? Will you do what it takes to defeat President Trump? Brave wins. So will you be brave? Will you fight? Will you fight with everything you have? Will you never give up? Will you never give in? Will you fight like your life depends upon it? Because the truth is, it does.
Yes. All right, let's give it up for the senator, y'all.
All right. Give it up for Senator Gillibrand. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. All right, y'all. One more time for Senator Gillibrand.